A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bini Advani, and on behalf of the Digital Fifth, I welcome you to Bank-Fintech Summit 2024. Before we officially inaugurate the conclave, we have a masterclass for you by Mr. Shashank Shekhar, co-founder and head of consulting the Digital Fifth, on crafting successful bank-fintech alliances balance between innovation, growth, and regulatory compliance. Please let's welcome him on stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So welcome you all to the Bharat FinTech Summit, second edition. And before as Bini announced, before that conclave starts, I'll take you through the masterclass. A very interesting topic, right? I think we all know that 10 years, 12 years back when the FinTech arrival started happening, it was all talked about that, okay, there will be a disruption kind of things. But slowly banks and FinTech learned that, okay, there is a collaboration is the way to go forward, right? And that's where I'm going to talk about that, what it takes to build that alliances, and how to make it work successfully. So we'll start. Before that, Bini has already taken my name, Shashank. So I've worked with L&D Infotech, Wipro, and the DCB Bank, where I was managing the digital banking and open banking, where I learned the tricks of the FinTech alliances. And then I'm part of the Digital Fifth, managing the consulting. So, Arif, so just go through, right? Just go next. So this is just a snapshot of what's happening in the industry, right? You can see many banks are trying to partner with the fintechs across the different area. Started with the payments, but slowly it started moving to the neo-banking space, where the neo-banking, where you talk about that building that banking partnership, and largely it started happening in the lending space, right? And it's extending beyond the wealth insurance. So that's where you can see that Federal has been leading the way, working with the fintechs, Axis Bank, and many of the small finance bank. You can look at the Shivalik, Equitas, because they also see enough benefits in the partnership, right? So this is just a snapshot. I'll just go through some of the examples. They're very specific, that what kind of the alliances have been built and how they're making it work. Okay, so some of the very prominent use cases where you can see in the industry, where the Equitas, a small finance bank, partner with Neo to launch a neo-banking platform. What do you mean by neo-banking platforms? Where that fintech operates the banking interface for that bank, right? And that's where that they acquire the customers, they do the servicing, but back-end everything engine is managed by the banks, right? So that's where Neo data is quite old, but it helps them to open more than 1 million accounts. So Neo helps them to open more than 1 million accounts with them. And partnership working pretty well. AU Small Finance Bank, again, some of the prominent example of the Small Finance Bank, because they started late, right? Because of the licensing only came in 2016, and being of the size of the organizations, not having the large reach, they see the potential in the fintech partnership. So AUX Small Finance Bank, IXEGO, primarily the co-branded credit card, where that they take care of the distribution. Uttar Small Finance Bank, Finable in the personal loan segment, that's definitely they're taking care of the small ticket digital lending product that they're interfacing with the customers, right? So these are some of the partnership. Few more. Can you just go to the next? Again, Equitas with the Grove to open an FD's account. So this is very interesting. Now many of the banks have started partnering with the fintechs to open an FDs, right? And that's become much easier for them. And that's extended beyond the fintechs to the non-financial company. How many of you have the money control app, right? Have you seen the experience that there is an option to open an FD account there? That's actually just taking a credit that we have helped that money control to build that kind of functionality, okay? Again, so I'll just skip some of these examples, come to the crux of the topic. Just go next. Yeah, just go next. Okay, so why do they do the partnership, right? What is the benefit? What is in for them, right? What is the need? One is the definitely innovation. Look at the classic case of the neo-banking, where that earlier the banks used to have that only interface to acquire the customer, do the servicing, but now you have a third-party interface who get the customer onboarding, building through the better customer experience. That's where the innovation came into the picture. Then also the new market and customer segments. Many of the banks may not have access to the certain segments, or they may not be operating in certain segments. Like, for example, DCB Bank. So they may not have the much wider access into the MSME segment, but they would like to partner with somebody who can have a much better expertise in MSME lending, right? So that's where that they try to a new market customer segment. Like Equitas, when they felt that to have a Neo to take them to the larger market, because it's a completely digital platforms, right? While that Equitas may not able to pull that through the branches, but they thought that the Neo will help them to get that new customers, and especially the millennial customers. Like banks always find it difficult to cater to the millennials. There the Neo banking comes to access that to market. Customer experience, I think we have been pampered by all the newest platforms like Amazon, Uber, Swiggy's, where that customer experience is at the top, right? And that's where they started feeling banks that how to build those kind of experience for my customers. Because banks have been typically not known to have that superior customer experience. That's where they started partnering with the fintechs to help them to build those customer experience, right? Accelerated digital transformation, this is very interesting. Since they started partnering with the fintech, they had to upscale their technologies backend, right? Because to partner with a fintech, you have to do a technology integration. And for that to happen, you need to upscale, improve your API stacks and everything. So that's started pushing the banks to fast track their digital transformations. Risk management and compliance, this is primarily where the fintech started feeling that since they don't understand much of the risk, they don't understand much of the compliance, how the bank partnership can help them. And they're still learning through the process. And definitely creating a new business model, right? So that's there. So how does this partnership comes into the picture, right? So this is what the banks bring on the table, what the fintech brings on the table, right? So banks definitely brings that their customer base, because having the large customer presence, they bring that customer access to the fintech. They have the capital, undoubtedly, right? The banks have the access to the capital. Regulatory experience, I think banks understand. How many of you are from the banks? A quite good population. You understand that what kind of the regulation pressure that we all carry, right? So when I was in DCB Bank days, every year of the RBI audits, and like 10 days, 15 days is like gone out of the box, right? So you are continuously catering to their requirements, and very tough, very tough. But that's bring that experience to them. They understand the regulatory requirement, and especially in today's days, it's very critical. And they have the distribution capabilities because of the branches. What the fintech brings on the table, they definitely have that innovations quotient built into that business model, right? Because that's where their survival, like their completely business model is aligned to the technology. So product offering, agility. They know how to move fast, fail, then build the process, and then continue to agile. Customer experience, they have learned the trick that how to engage with the customers, like how to nudge the customers, based on the different customer segments. If it's the millennials, they will have a different expectations. So how to cater to that? If there is a rural population, how to cater to that rural population? How to engage with them, right? Cutting edge technology. So that's their entire foundation is on the technology itself. So they use all kind of technology, be it on the APIs, be it on the cloud, be it on your APIs, AIs, and all these things. Fail fast culture, they don't bother about that in case if they are failing, right? Startups, that's in the gene of any startup, right? So they will follow that, and then distribution access through a market, through the digital marketing. They understand the digital marketing. So both the party, when they bring together their own strengths, it helps them to create the new business model, building the better customer trust, customer-centric products. Like customer-centric product, like I'll give an example. Okay, so banks has always been giving the loans, right? And the salary loans typically like based on your salary, what are the loans can be given to you, right? Based on the underwriting. But many of the times, especially on the millennial segments, right? People may need an advance salary, right? Advance loans. Now the salary is getting credited at the 31st or 30th, but they may need a money at the 15th of the month. How to do that? So that's where that entire innovation has been curated and that lending product created. They know how to use the data. So better uses of the data at both the parties, and definitely through the use of the technology, able to manage the cost. Before I go, I will be happy to pick up any question. Anytime if you have any question, this is masterclass. Okay, this is not a proper session. So any question at any time that you have, please raise your hand and we'll take the questions. So I'll continue. So where that they're playing with each other's strength. Yeah, please.
3-4 months, I think 6 months back, Equitas announced a partnership with some neobank for fixed deposit. But after RBI raised some objections or whatever, it was slowed down. So, what is the progress of raising fixed deposit via these neobanks and other things?
Okay, so I think if I understand, I remember very correctly, it was with the Google. While Equitas is still continue to sell the FD through the different neo-banking platforms and third-party platform, but as far as I understand, it was primarily from the Google when they started launching the FD, and it may be for different reason because they didn't wanted large tech companies maybe to get into that. That was the only reason. But otherwise, Equitas still continue to sell the FD on the other fintech platforms.
So, any clarification from the RBI has come regarding partnership with Google and Facebook and other things? Or
That's
not
a
yet?
big take, right? That's where that the RBI may not be looking that some of the large tech companies to get into the financial services. Now the Google is already there as a Google Pay, but maybe trying to restrict their access to the larger. I'm just my interpretation that they were looking that they don't want the large tech to get into the financial services too deep into that.
And one last question, what is the progress on raising fixed deposit via neobanks for the various small finance banks or any entity? What is the total fixed deposit which has been raised till date?
I will not have a number. I don't think the fintechs also publish the data on the number of accounts acquired, but I don't think so. But it's a quite good number, especially like fintech, like you look at bank like Utkarsh, Ujjivan, those who don't have an access, they could able to good asset book on that fixed deposit. They've been able to get at the good market.
Shashank, I have a couple of questions here. I'm Sumit here. So I think in previous slides we talked about what the fintechs bring on the table for the BFSI industry. So we talked about the customer experience that they bring, and also the access to a specific, or let's say a specific set of customers. So maybe a millennial or working woman or senior citizen or similar kind of stuffs. And in last, you said 2012 when fintech started visible in India. And so in last 12 years, we could see a lot of work which has happened towards customer experience. But maybe I may have a little limited information, but from the product kind of innovation, we see a very little or limited innovation which has happened towards product. If I talk about retail banking, let's say limited to focusing towards the banking sector. So I don't see much of the innovation towards the product side. Maybe I may have a limited understanding about it. Maybe if you can add certain points.
So there has been lots of the product innovation, right? Undoubtedly. Like, I'm not going the how it is working or not working, but look at that BNPL, right? Buy now, pay later. It's a quite good innovation in the fintech
But I think that is there with all the banks probably. Buy now, pay later. UPI, I would say it's the biggest innovation which has happened.
That's primarily the regulatory. But fintech, so BNPL has happened primarily from the fintech side, right? Working again with the banks, because many of the fintechs can't do the lending, right? And that's where that RBI get into that and introduce that, okay, you need to have a partner with the bank and some DLG guidelines and all these things. But BNPL was a good...
So again, my question is, where is the moat? Basically, if fintech is building something which big banks are immediately acquiring or adopting the similar kind of things, right? So where the difference which fintech is creating and where do you see the sustainability of that fintech?
So I'll come to that point where that I want to talk about that how that entire that ecosystem is operating. Just wait for the couple, because it's like they are competing. Definitely some of the, especially the large banks. But the moat, if you look at it with the small banks, right? Small banks see a win-win situation with the fintechs, right? But large bank like ICICI or Axis or SDFC, they may not have but still they continue to do the partnership, right? Because they're able to either create a niche segment, opening at the niche segment for the banks. They still see that opportunity is there. And that's why Axis, ICICI continue to do the partnership. Like SME is in a large segment, if you look at it. Because it's a complex, MSME is a complex segment. So BX is partnered with Open, ICICI partnered with Open to get into that market. How it will evolve, whether it will be beneficial, profitable, time will tell. But talking about the large bank, but a small bank definitely see a good potential. Like, so look at the case of the Federal, when they partnership with Jupiter, their almost customer base could double. It's a huge, right? And if you look at their investor presentation, you will see that their CASA deposits also has increased. And marginally, they had increased also. So there is some definitely, but you may not find too many of the success story as of now. There are definitely, but I think things are moving into that direction.
So maybe as you said, we will discuss in subsequent discussions. So again, when you talked about Jupiter, I think the larger banks like ICICI or Axis, they have also they also came into the aggregator kind of things. They are also providing the same kind of features that Jupiter also brings for other banks. Maybe Federal Bank, they don't have that much of scale to build at this point in time, and then the reason they partnered with Jupiter. But again, if I talk about the sustainability, maybe if you can address in the
you said
subsequent.
right. The large bank may not find it, and the right, definitely, because they have the scale, they have the reach, but the small banks find that as strength into that process. Okay, this is again more repeating the same thing. So expertise are shared with each other, customer experience are getting built into that process. APIs, right? I think partnership, the backbone is the APIs, where that banks have started building that all their banking services delivered through the APIs, right? And the fintechs definitely operate through the APIs. Credit, they definitely partnership helped into the extending the credit part of it. Today, if you look at it, undoubtedly, if you look at the last 5 years, I think that when everybody is talking about MSME credit, SME credit, credit to the non-salaried class, right? When we look at that from the bank perspective, it's still not easy. Banks doesn't want to touch on the non-salaried class. Bank doesn't typically touch upon that unsecured MSME loan and all this thing, where some of the fintechs has started experimenting with the data and all this thing, and they're working with the banks because ultimately the lender has to be the bank. Both see that because of the tech capabilities of the fintech, using the data that SME is fintech is bringing on the table, they could lend that. But it's, if you look at the large asset book in the country, it may be very minute, but it's moving in that direction, right? It's merchant cash advance. It's again a good innovation where that based on the POS data or the QR code data, you can start doing that processing, right? Of the loans. So this was I was talking about, Sumit, like the market is operating into the different models. Okay, compete. ICICI will say that, okay, I have that strength. I have learned the tricks with you also because of the technologies, capabilities and all this thing. I know the tricks. I can build on my own platform. And actually it's happening. Today, if you look at it, many of the banks has started putting their own digital banking platform, which is quite equal to the fintech platforms, right? And they're positioning as a branding itself. If you look at ICICI iMobile Pay, their position is as an acquisition engine. Or say, for example, AU0101, or say, for example, Axis has launched the Neo in the business banking space. They're creating, so they're competing directly with the fintech. They may be collaborating also. So large part is on the collaboration, where especially the majority of the small finance bank has found a sweet spot to partner, but the large bank also partner in very specific areas. Payments definitely is in a space where that UPI and all this thing, if you look at it, UPI has been great innovation, but banks lost the trick, right? Because of the customer experience and all this, but banks find out a way to work with the fintechs like Google Pay and Phone Pay. But ultimately, engine is from the banks itself, right? So they are collaborating. Many of the banks are also trying to find out a good business model that if any fintech is there, why don't you invest? Like I say, ePay later, you might have heard about it, right? Which is a kind of the BNPL platforms kind of thing. They invested into that platforms. And now it's their own company, so they're working collaboratively, but as they're putting an investment into that. SDFC, you might have heard of the Lentra, right? Lentra is an LOS platform. So there is some investment into that, okay? And then acquire, right? Many of the fintechs will, banks are trying to acquire some of those fintech, acquire their tech capabilities and all these things, right? So that's where they're building into that. So all these four models exist. One single bank may be operating in all the four models that they will study with, that will be working into that. So that's why it's trying to that. This is the way industry is evolving. So ICICI Bank may be collaborating, but at the same time competing also. Axis will also do the same. Small banks typically try to collaborate more. Not much action on the investment and acquisition, but definitely that's a study that banks are looking to collaborate with them. Okay, so this is some of the example. You can see that Axis is investment, is competing. They are also collaborating. They do the partnership with the Bank Open. Federal is they're primarily collaborating, right? They are not trying to compete with the fintech because they know that there is strength, okay, and they know that what they can create with the fintechs. So if you try to classify, again, it's more like in the same what I was talking about earlier, but largely either it will be investment or acquisitions, the partnership. Largely it will be open banking enabled partnership. Open banking, what is that? Primarily where banks are opening their APIs and making the third party to use those APIs and to deliver the services. Classic example is neo banking. But also there are evolution in the API aggregators, like payment as a service platforms, banking as a service platform. What these guys are doing, that they are using the APIs of the banks and giving the API services through the banking, for the banking services to the third party. Like example of Decentro, M2P is on the payment side of it, or you look at the Decentro, Upswing. What they, like Upswing is a classic where that they have partnered with a small finance bank. They're using the FD APIs and giving it to the third party who want to sell the FD services on their platform. So look at that, how the business model are evolving in the partnership with the bank and fintech. So many of this platform where you will see the FD, that platform may not be directly working with the banks to use the APIs. There will be an aggregator in between coming into the place. I think white label technology, just hold on. White label technology solution, so many times they will use the platforms as a white label and they will be using for their technologies, complementing their technology stack. Product-based partnership, either it could be payments, it could be the lending, it could be the wealth. There that some of the partnership will happen. And some of the banks will run the accelerator and incubator programs as a part to primarily bring some, explore some of these fintech opportunities and all these things to partner, right? So these are the spaces where typically you will start seeing the partnership. Okay, so quick, I know some of the things may be repetitive, but from the bank's perspective, what does the bank looks at it, right? So they definitely look at that, there is a better customer acquisition engine, where that the fintech is helping them to acquire more and more customers. Like so I was talking about the money control. Now the money control is not a fintech, but they're trying to become a fintech. They may have the reach in their content, but they may not have the reach to acquire the customers, right? So that's where they'll partner with some of those platforms, which will help them to acquire like Upswing and all these things to do the FD acquisition. They will definitely like to improve the profitability, try to reduce the customer acquisition cost, try to reduce the servicing cost, because it goes through the completely driven through the tech, right? No branch space and all these things. I think distribution, digital distribution, because the fintech doesn't operate through the branches, right? And fintech is building the front end for that. Credit models, response to new trends. With the banks, when they try to work with the fintech partnership, they try to look at how they can be always up ahead into looking at some of the trends which are emerging in the market. Because banks has its own challenges, right? So, and I'll talk about some of the challenges. We have spoken about all the good things, what it brings, but I'll come to the challenges also. Okay, so let's look at that from the banks. It's not easy, right? Many of them, you might be involved into building the bank-fintech partnership. Everybody will say that it can be up and running in 2 to 3 months. But it doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen. So typically, what are the challenges? Definitely regulatory compliance. Bank has to navigate through the strict compliance. Let's say, for example, neo-banking example, again, I was taking about it. Or the lending. If you are doing the partnership, you have to follow the digital lending guidelines. You have to strictly adhere to the KYC guidelines. And you might be hearing lots of the news also in the industry. Like, say, for example, some of the banks have been put on the penalty because the KYC norms has not been followed. And KYC norms typically because of the third party who is involved into the acquisition of customer. Because entire responsibility of that partnership with respect to compliance lies with the bank. And banks find it difficult that how to control the third party interface, that acquisition. So that's where that banks try to put pressure on that. Integration of system. Still many of the banks has transformed their systems in the last 10 years, but they still have a challenges to do the integration. One fintech API integration at the bank's end may find it like any techies, if you talk about API integration, how much time it will take? Okay, 2 to 3 days. But it doesn't happen in the bank space, right? Because bank may not have the proper documentation, bank may not have the proper configuration of the APIs, right? So that's where the integration will have a challenge. And maybe they will have the backend which doesn't have the support the APIs. So these are the typical challenges you will have. They always look at the data security and the privacy risk. Because fintechs are operating on the cloud, they don't know where the data are stored. That's where that RBI came with the data localization, making sure that every fintech operating in the country through the cloud has a data center in the cloud, right? Cloud in the India. So the data security challenges, risk management, like balancing the risk tolerance. Now look at that. Lending is a classic case where that if the NPAs start happening, how do you control that? Because fintech may have some kind of the liberal mechanism to acquire the customer, do the underwriting, but bank will find it difficult that how do I manage that kind of the risk? Reconciliation, like reconciliation issues will come in ample. And that's where you start looking at the platforms to manage those reconciliation. Just look at that from the operations guy's perspective. Till the now, he has been always in the mindset that customers are coming through the branches only in their channels. Now that all the transaction entries start coming from the different fintech partners and all these things, how does the reconciliation to be done? All these challenges start coming up. So risk management, reputation, in case if anything goes wrong, you get tom-tom about the whenever you announce about the partnership, right? Okay, bank has done the partnership, doing very good, but suddenly if any kind of the regulatory non-compliance happen, with respect to the fintech partnership, you will have the huge reputation issues. And banks always found out difficult on the scalability and reliability. I tell you, like, so when we were in the DCB bank, we were a small bank, right? When the PhonePe was approached us for the partnership on the UPI, we couldn't able to figure it out that whether our system will be able to scale that kind of the volume that they were talking about. And literally we backed off. So, and many of the challenges still being faced when the UPI transaction happens. It's a bank system start faltering into that. In fact, we will have one of the very interesting topic coming during the day where you can check the agenda, like banks are looking at the building in a dual core stack kind of things to manage kind of the scale transactions. Okay, just go next. But these are the challenges from the bank side, but you have a challenges from the fintech also, right? How to integrate with the bank's technology? Because fintech's technology will be little up ahead. They will be more agile. But bank's technology may operate in the certain way, right? You will still may have some legacy platforms, legacy infrastructure, but how do you do the integration with them? Due diligence process. So right now I'm working, me and my team is working with one bank for the couple of fintech partnership. Fintech is bothered like with filling so many checklists continuously. DLG guidelines checklist, security checklist, there is a risk checklist and all these things. And there is like 100 of points are there and keep on responding. Very stringent due diligence. And banks has to do that. Because ultimately we have seen that what are the challenges that banks is having, right? So these are the challenges. User experience, because banks are working with all the customer segments. Fintech may be operating into one particular segments, right? How do you manage that kind of the diversity with the banks working together? Or balancing power in collaboration. This is very interesting, right? If a small finance bank, a small fintech, power is balanced, right? But a small finance bank and large fintech, which is unicorn, they may have definitely on a much stronghold kind of things, right? So how do we balance the power? Large bank, small fintech, who dominates, right? So these are the typically challenges that fintech starts facing, right? Market fit, many times, so when they work with the banks to make that product, design the product, they typically always have an apprehension. Because banks are continuous to keep on guiding that, okay, you need to change certain elements into the product. Then they start feeling whether it will work in the market or not. So these are the typical challenges that you will have. And then customer onboarding, right? Fintech wants to onboard the customer in the click 2 steps, right? But bank want to follow the entire process. You want to go through the dedupe, you want to go through the AML checks, you want to do through the KYC, then you have to do the video KYC. But fintech will say, no, I want to another like 10 seconds. Doesn't happen, right? So they will find out the typical challenge that how to balance the customer experience as well as the processes to be followed. So these are the typical challenges. I think, how to solve that? Both banks and fintech together. This is very important. Bank has to have a mentorship role also to guide the fintech that, okay, compliance, we need to adhere to that, okay. I'll guide through the process that how does it happens, what are the compliance requirements are there in this product, because many times they may not have an idea about it. Like FLDG came, but many of the fintech is still trying to figure it out how to comply with the FLDG requirement. How do they comply with that? How do we figure it out that how do we calculate that what an NPA is happening, what kind of FLDG to be invoked? But there the bank has to guide through the process. Involve and own, it doesn't matter that fintech is driving, but still the bank has to own that, right? So own the responsibility, work very closely with the fintechs to drive that, own the compliance and security. So as I was talking about, the compliance and security has to be completely owned by the bank and guide that fintechs to do that, right? That's very important. How to do that? Typically work very closely with the product team of the fintechs, the compliance, they may not have the compliance and the risk also. So you may have to largely work with the product and the technology teams. You have to do mentoring also. So compliance and security. Okay, simplify the process. That's many times banks has some legacy process has been defined and built in the process. the regulatory compliance, I understand, but many times it may be very cumbersome. How do you figure it out that simplify the process? Be it on the data collection, be it on the KYC, be it on the... So KYC, I'm not saying that you undermine any compliance requirement, but how can you figure it out that you can simplify the process so that fintech can take care of the seamless onboarding? Okay, and then culture alignment, because that's also very typical challenges. Fintechs are the next gen kind of the companies, and then banks are typically been in the system for long. The people with mindset, the fintech team mindset are typically have a misalignment. I keep on facing a struggle between the banks team and the fintech. We try to bring the bridge between these two parties. And the supportive and the progressive, you need to support and be progressive. And then last, probably I'll talk about that fintechs. You closely work on the collaboration approach. Don't try to be like I'm superior because of I have the fintech technology, I'm coming from the startup, I'm an entrepreneur, that I'll dictate my terms and all this thing doesn't work. When you are working in the banks, you need to go with a proper collaborative approach to work. And you need to respect, right? Compliance integration, you need to respect the regulator, you need to respect the way the bank works. Okay? You don't have any choice on that front, right? Because if the banks has faced a challenge on the compliance, it will lead you down, right? So that's where that compliance integration is very critical. Bank hierarchy navigation. Okay, this is another challenge, right? Because banks may try to reach out that, okay, to whom to take the KYC approval? Sorry? Okay, I'll just, sir, I'll just finishing last slide. So we'll just pick up the questions, just last. Okay, so hierarchy, you need to figure it out to whom to talk about it, whom to take an approval, right? So KYC, we need to take, like for example, once we reckon the business requirement document for the fintech partnership, we have to take 6 or 7 approvals. Whom to take the approvals from the banks, right? You need to very clarity. System and standardization help the banks to standardize the security platforms as well as that. Be on the transparent on the integrations, right? More on the tech side. So I'll stop here. There were some of the aspects that we wanted to talk about, but now happy to pick up some of the questions. Sir, please.
Thank you so much, Shashank.
Yeah.
I have 2-3 observations from what you have spoken. First of all, I am Vivek Sangle from EPS.
Yes.
I have 3 observations. One is that you spoke about the collaboration plus competition among the fintechs. You spoke about the different maturity of technology stacks. And the third, you also spoke about, I think, the integration part of it.
Yes.
What I understand from my understanding is there is something called the bank orchestrated fintech ecosystem, wherein the bank will own the customer and bringing upon the personalized requirement of the MSMEs, they will try to bring in the fintechs who will be able to specify or specifically fulfill the needs. What do you see the emergence of that kind of ecosystem in a country like India?
So very interesting. I think segment that you brought into is like largely unsolved, right? If you look at it from the formal banking ecosystem perspective, very important. So statistics also available, like 10 to 15% only MSME is having an access to the lending ecosystem, where the banks are working very closely with the fintechs, and especially when the fintechs were talking about fintechs who are having the NBFC licenses also, because they're getting into that regulatory framework. And especially after the co-lending and all this thing coming up, banks is happy to partner with the fintechs to own the customer, work under the co-lending guidelines. So that's why the co-lending is expected to grow. So that's one dimension, right? Second is definitely because MSMEs typically is very complex. Fintech brings some element of the technology to underwrite, right? To, like for example, the various source of the data based on the GST and rest of the other things, and help the banks to underwrite. So where the banks see some strength. But banks is definitely very cautious about that kind of the MSME customer that comes on the table. Well, banks has not been able to solve, right? Banks are still trying to solve, and one of the topic is very focused on the MSME credit because that's we wanted to speak about it, especially unsecured. Secured is still banks has been doing pretty well on that secured MSME lending, and it's not easy, like because many of the MSME may not have the collaterals to put it into and get the lending. So that's unsecured business lending where the banks is trying to work with, but not much work has there. NBFC, some of the NBFC has taken a leap, right? Where that they are working largely with the fintechs like Lending Card or many of the other, I'm just picking the random names which are there. NBFC is doing good in the collaboration with fintechs into the MSME space. Banks has been largely still continue to do more on the secured MSME lending where the fintech doesn't operate. Fintech doesn't, because secured lending is still very complex because you need to do the evaluation of the collaterals and all these things, right? So that's where the challenge is there. But I think still MSME credit has to evolve a lot much to happen in the segment.
But my question is, do you see the role of bank orchestrated MSME ecosystems?
Maybe I think RBI is already building on that kind of platforms. RBI Innovation Hub. Just hold on. I think we may have that announcement where that RBI ED will be coming, right? Just let us know so that people can move. Okay, sorry, sir. So bank-created orchestrated fintech ecosystem, yes. One is definitely RBI try to create that kind of ecosystem. Definitely banks become party to that. And that's primarily they are designing the systems to cater to the MSME credit. Bank on its their own, as an individually, they tried into some small space with some partnership with some fintechs, like for example, Open, where their SME focus fintechs are there. But that's still very much on the SME side, not on the MSME. I have not seen any banks is trying to create a kind of that ecosystem with the use of the fintechs. They are working, but it's not largely being created, their own created ecosystems to support that MSME. Yeah, thanks.